The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets of the capital city when Marcus first saw the dragon. He had been digging through the garbage behind the royal bakery, searching for scraps of bread that might still be edible, when the ground began to shake beneath his bare feet. Marcus was only 12 years old, but the streets had aged him beyond his years. His clothes were nothing more than torn rags held together by hope and stubborn thread. His dark hair hung in matted clumps around his gaunt face, and his ribs showed clearly through his thin chest. He had been living on the streets for 3 years now, ever since the plague took his parents and left him with nowhere to go. The other street children avoided him. They said he was cursed, that death followed him wherever he went. Maybe they were right. After all, everyone he had ever loved was gone. His parents, his little sister who died just months after their parents, even old Henrik who had tried to take care of him for a few weeks before disappearing one night, never to return. But Marcus had learned to survive alone. He knew which merchants threw away the best food, which alleyways were safe to sleep in, and which guards could be outrun if caught stealing. He had become invisible to the world above, just another piece of human debris that polite society preferred not to see. The shaking grew stronger, and Marcus looked up from the pile of moldy bread he had been examining. In the distance, he could see a massive shape moving through the sky. At first, he thought it might be a storm cloud, but then he saw the wings. Enormous wings that blocked out the sun as they beat against the morning air. The dragon was unlike anything Marcus had ever imagined. Its scales were deep emerald green with hints of gold that caught the light as it moved. It was easily the size of a small building, with a long serpentine neck and tail that whipped through the air. But what struck Marcus most was not its size or beauty, but the intelligence he could see in its ancient eyes as it circled overhead. People began pouring out of buildings, pointing and screaming. Some fell to their knees in terror. Others ran for cover. Marcus had heard stories of dragons, of course. Everyone had. But they were supposed to be extinct, killed off centuries ago by the great dragon hunters. Yet here was one, very much alive, descending toward the royal quarter of the city. The dragon landed with a thunderous crash in the main square, its claws scraping deep gouges into the stone. People scattered in all directions, but Marcus found himself moving closer instead of away. Something about the creature called to him, drew him forward despite every instinct telling him to run. As he crept closer, staying hidden behind overturned market stalls and abandoned carts, Marcus could see that the dragon was not attacking. Instead, it seemed to be waiting for something. Its great head turned this way and that, as if searching the crowd of terrified faces. Then the Empress arrived. Empress Lina rode into the square on a white stallion, flanked by her personal guard. She was a woman of perhaps 30 years, with flowing red hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her armor was polished to a mirror shine, and a jeweled sword hung at her side. She had ruled the kingdom for only 5 years, since her father's death, but already she was known throughout the land as both beautiful and ruthless. The Empress dismounted and walked toward the dragon with no apparent fear. The guards tried to follow, but she held up a hand to stop them. She approached the great beast alone, her chin raised defiantly. "So," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the square despite its normal tone, "you have finally come." The dragon's head lowered until it was level with the Empress. When it spoke, its voice was like distant thunder, deep and rumbling, but somehow musical at the same time. "The time has come, daughter of Aldrich. The old agreements must be honored." Marcus crept closer, fascinated despite his fear. He had never heard of dragons that could speak, but this one clearly could. Its words sent shivers through the watching crowd. "I'm not my father," the Empress replied coldly. "I made no agreements with your kind." "But you benefit from them still," the dragon responded. "Your kingdom prospers because of the compact your bloodline made with mine. The crops grow rich, the mines yield gold, the borders remain secure. All because of our ancient bond. A bond one never asked for," the Empress said, but Marcus could hear uncertainty creeping into her voice. Nevertheless, it exists, and now payment is due. The dragon's eyes swept across the crowd, and, for a moment, Marcus thought they might have settled on him. But that was impossible. He was nobody, nothing. Just a street rat hiding behind a cart. "What do you want?" the Empress asked. "What was promised?" the dragon replied. "A life freely given. Someone who will come willingly to serve as keeper of the old knowledge, guardian of the ancient ways. Someone pure of heart who has known suffering but has not let it turn them bitter." The Empress laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. "And where exactly am I supposed to find such a person? My subjects may serve me, but they hardly do so willingly. And as for pure of heart," she gestured dismissively at the crowd. "Look around you, beast. This is the real world. There is no such thing as purity." The dragon's expression grew sad. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps the old ways truly are dead. But the compact remains. If no one comes forward willingly, then I will choose." The great head turned toward the crowd, and people began to back away in terror. Mothers grabbed their children. Men reached for weapons they did not have. The Empress's hand moved to her sword, but Marcus could see the uncertainty in her posture. Whatever this compact was, she clearly understood its importance. "Wait," the Empress said. "Give me time. I will find someone." 3 days, the dragon said. "At sunset on the 3rd day, I will return. If no one has come forward by then, I will take what I need to preserve the compact. The choice will no longer be yours." With that, the dragon spread its enormous wings and launched itself into the sky. The downdraft from its takeoff knocked over several more carts and sent debris swirling through the square. Within moments, it was gone, leaving behind only the gouges in the stone and the memory of its impossible presence. The crowd remained frozen for a long moment, then slowly began to disperse. The Empress stood in the center of the square, staring up at the sky where the dragon had disappeared. Her guards approached cautiously. "Your Majesty," one of them said. "What are your orders?" The Empress was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was tired. "Send word to the scholars. I want to know everything they can tell me about this compact. Search the royal archives, contact the historians. Someone must know the details of this agreement. And if we cannot find a volunteer," the guard asked. The Empress's expression hardened. "Then we will make one." Marcus watched from his hiding place as the royal party departed. His mind was racing, trying to process everything he had heard. A compact between the royal family and the dragons. Someone pure of heart who had known suffering but had not turned bitter. Someone willing to serve. He thought about his life on the streets, about all the people who had ignored him or driven him away. He thought about the hunger that gnawed at his belly every night, the cold that seeped into his bones during winter, the loneliness that sometimes felt like it might crush him entirely. But he also thought about the dragon's eyes. There had been something in them, a depth of knowledge and understanding that called to something deep inside him. And despite everything he had endured, Marcus realized that he was not bitter. Sad, yes. Afraid often, but not bitter. He still helped other street children when he could, still felt sympathy for the beggars and outcasts he encountered. The suffering had not poisoned his heart. As the square emptied, Marcus emerged from his hiding place. He stood where the dragon had been, looking up at the sky. 3 days. The Empress would spend that time searching for someone suitable, someone she could force or persuade to take on this burden. But Marcus was already beginning to wonder if the person the dragon sought might be standing right there in the empty square, invisible to the world, but perhaps not to ancient, intelligent eyes. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity throughout the city. The Empress's scholars worked frantically to uncover the details of the compact, while her guards questioned citizens and searched for potential volunteers. Proclamations were posted offering rewards for anyone willing to serve, but, as expected, there were no takers. The few who inquired quickly changed their minds when they learned more about what service to a dragon might entail. Marcus spent those days thinking. He wandered the streets as usual, scrounging for food and shelter, but his mind was elsewhere. He found himself drawn repeatedly to the square where the dragon had appeared, standing in the gouges its claws had left in the stone. On the evening of the second day, he overheard a conversation between two guards that made his blood run cold. "The Empress has made her choice," one was saying. "Young Lady Catherine from House Morland. She's only 16, but her family owes substantial debts to the crown. They'll hand her over rather than face financial ruin." "Poor girl," the other guard replied. "Though I suppose someone has to do it. Better her than my daughter." Marcus felt sick. Lady Catherine was just a child, probably terrified out of her mind. Being forced into service was exactly the opposite of what the dragon had requested, someone who came willingly, with a pure heart. This would only anger the creature and likely make things worse for everyone. That night, as he lay shivering in a doorway, Marcus made his decision. He had nothing to lose and potentially everything to gain. More importantly, he might be able to save an innocent girl from a fate she didn't deserve. As the sun set on the third day, Marcus made his way to the royal square. The Empress was already there with Lady Catherine, a pale, trembling girl in an elaborate dress that seemed to weigh her down. The square was surrounded by guards, but they paid no attention to one more street urchin in the gathering crowd. The dragon arrived precisely at sunset, landing in the same spot as before. Its eyes immediately found the Empress and the girl beside her. "This is your answer?" the dragon asked, and Marcus could hear disappointment in its voice. "Lady Catherine has volunteered to serve," the Empress said, though everyone could see the lie in the girl's terrified face. The dragon lowered its head to study the girl more closely. "Child," it said gently, "do you come willingly? Speak truthfully now, for I will know if you lie." Lady Catherine opened her mouth, but no words came out. Tears began streaming down her cheeks, and she shook her head almost imperceptibly. "I thought as much," the dragon said sadly. "The compact requires a willing heart, Empress. This child is here under duress. Her fear and resentment would poison everything we might accomplish together." "Then, what would you have me do?" the Empress demanded. "I have searched the entire kingdom. No one volunteers for such a fate willingly." Then, perhaps, came a small voice from the crowd. "You weren't looking in the right places." Everyone turned to stare as Marcus stepped forward. He was acutely aware of how he must look: dirty, ragged, painfully thin. But he walked with his head held high, his dark eyes fixed on the dragon. "I volunteer," he said clearly. The silence that followed Marcus's declaration stretched across the square like a taut rope ready to snap. Every eye was fixed on the ragged boy who had dared to speak in the presence of the Empress and the dragon. Some faces showed disbelief, others disgust, and a few revealed something that might have been hope. The Empress was the first to recover her voice. "Guards, remove this beggar immediately." "How dare you interrupt? Wait," the dragon said, its deep voice cutting through her words like a blade through silk. The great head turned toward Marcus, and those ancient eyes studied him with an intensity that made the boy feel as though his very soul was being examined. "Come closer, child." Marcus walked forward on legs that felt suddenly unsteady. Each step seemed to echo in the hushed square, and he could feel the weight of hundreds of stares pressing down on him. When he reached the center of the square, only a few feet from the dragon's massive head, he stopped and looked up into those intelligent green eyes. "What is your name?" the dragon asked. "Marcus, sir. I mean, your majesty. Marcus stumbled over the words, unsure of how one properly addressed a dragon. "Marcus will do," the dragon said, and Marcus thought he detected a hint of amusement in its voice. "Tell me, Marcus, why do you volunteer for this service?" The boy glanced back at Lady Catherine, who was still trembling beside the Empress. "Because she doesn't want to go, and I do. That seems like the right thing to do. And what do you know of what this service entails?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Nothing really, but I know it's important to you and to the kingdom, and I know that whatever it is, it should be done by someone who chooses it freely." The dragon was quiet for a long moment, its eyes never leaving Marcus's face. When it spoke again, its voice was softer. "You have known great suffering, haven't you, child?" "Yes," Marcus said simply. There was no point in denying what was written clearly in his appearance and circumstances. "And yet you would willingly take on more, to spare another? If I have to suffer anyway, I might as well make it mean something." The Empress stepped forward impatiently. "This is ridiculous. The boy is nothing but a street rat. He has no education, no breeding, no value whatsoever. You cannot seriously be considering." The dragon's head whipped toward her with such sudden violence that the Empress stumbled backward. "Be very careful, daughter of Aldrich. Your ignorance of your own kingdom's history does not give you license to speak of things you do not understand." The rebuke sent a chill through the watching crowd. No one had ever heard anyone speak to the Empress in such a tone, and her face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. "This boy," the dragon continued, its gaze returning to Marcus, "carries the blood of the old kingdom. I can smell it on him, see it in the shape of his bones and the color of his eyes. His ancestors were kings when yours were still farmers scratching in the dirt." Marcus felt his knees go weak. "That's impossible. My parents were just ordinary people. Poor people. Poor, yes. But not ordinary," the dragon said gently. "The blood of the ancient kings runs thin now, scattered among the common folk. Most who carry it never know what heritage flows in their veins. But I know. I have known your lineage for 1,000 years." The Empress's face had gone pale. "You're saying this beggar has royal blood? That's impossible. The old royal lines died out centuries ago. The old royal houses fell, yes. But their blood survived in their servants, their guards, their lovers. It scattered like seeds on the wind, taking root in unexpected places." The dragon's eyes remained fixed on Marcus. "This child carries more royal blood than you do, Empress. His claim to the throne would be stronger than yours, were such things still determined by blood alone." Marcus felt dizzy. None of this made sense. He was nobody, nothing. A street orphan with no past and no future. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Understanding will come with time," the dragon said kindly. "For now, it is enough that you have offered yourself freely. But before I accept your service, you must know what it means. The compact between your ancestors and mine was made in the earliest days of this kingdom, when dragons and humans worked together to build a civilization that would endure. We dragons became guardians of ancient knowledge, keepers of magic and wisdom that humans alone could not preserve. In exchange, each generation was to provide a keeper, a human who would live among us and serve as a bridge between our two peoples. But dragons have been gone for centuries," Marcus said. "Not gone. Hidden. Waiting. Your recent rulers forgot their obligations, chose to believe we no longer existed rather than honor the compact. But the magic that protects this kingdom comes from that ancient agreement. The prosperous harvests, the rich mines, the security from invasion, all of it flows from the bond between dragon and human. As that bond weakened, so did the kingdom's fortunes." Marcus thought about the stories he had heard from older beggars, tales of better times when food was plentiful and work was easy to find. The kingdom has been struggling lately. People say things aren't as good as they used to be. Indeed, and they will continue to worsen unless the compact is renewed. That is why I have returned. That is why a keeper is needed. What would I have to do? The dragon considered its words carefully. "You would come with me to the Dragon Realm, a place that exists alongside your world but hidden from it. There you would learn our ways, study the ancient texts, and help preserve knowledge that would otherwise be lost forever. You would be our link to humanity, helping us understand how your people have changed and what they need from us. Would I ever see this world again? In time, yes, but the initial training takes years. You would need to learn to read and write in the old tongues, study magic and history and philosophy. It would not be easy, and it would be lonely at first." Marcus looked around the square at the faces watching him. These people had never seen him before tonight, and they would forget him just as quickly. He had no friends here, no family, no life worth preserving. The prospect of loneliness didn't frighten him. He was already alone. "The girl can go home?" he asked, nodding toward Lady Catherine. "Yes," the dragon said. "If you take her place, she will be free." Marcus squared his shoulders and looked up into those ancient eyes. "Then I accept." The dragon studied him for another long moment, then slowly nodded. "Very well, but there is one final test." The great head lowered until it was only inches from Marcus. "Place your hand on my snout, child. If the old blood truly runs in your veins, if your heart is truly pure, then you'll be able to touch me without harm. But if there is darkness in you, if the suffering you have endured has poisoned your soul, then my scales will burn you like acid." Marcus heard gasps from the crowd. Even the Empress took a step back. But Marcus didn't hesitate. He reached out with one small, dirty hand and placed it flat against the dragon's snout. The scales were warm beneath his palm, and he could feel a strange tingling sensation running up his arm. For a moment, the world seemed to blur around the edges, and he had the strangest sensation of falling upward into starlight. Then the feeling passed, and he was simply a boy touching a dragon's nose. "Remarkable," the dragon breathed, and Marcus could feel the words as much as hear them. "Not only do you carry the royal blood, but it runs stronger in you than in any keeper who has come before. You will be truly special, Marcus of the old blood." The dragon lifted its head and looked out over the crowd. "The compact is renewed. A keeper has been chosen freely and accepted willingly. Let it be known throughout the kingdom that the ancient alliance between dragon and human has been restored." Marcus felt a flutter of fear in his stomach. Everything was happening so fast. "When do we leave?" "Now," the dragon said. "There is no time to waste. The longer the compact remains dormant, the more the kingdom suffers. Your training must begin immediately." "But I don't have anything to take with me." The dragon's expression grew gentle. "Child, look at yourself. What you have that would be worth taking." Marcus looked down at his ragged clothes and bare feet, then laughed despite himself. "You're right. I suppose I'm ready to go." "Wait," the Empress called out. "If this boy truly carries royal blood, then he belongs here. I could adopt him, make him my heir. Surely that would serve the kingdom better than sending him away with you." The dragon's eyes flashed dangerously. "You would seek to break the compact, even as it is being renewed? This child has given his word, and I have accepted his service. Would you make yourself an oath breaker, Empress?" "I'm thinking of what's best for the kingdom," she replied, but her voice lacked conviction. "What's best for the kingdom is honoring the agreements that protect it," the dragon said firmly. "Marcus has chosen his path. Let no one stand in his way." The dragon turned back to Marcus. "Are you afraid, child?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "A little," he admitted, "but I've been afraid every day of my life. At least now I have a reason to be afraid." Wise words. Fear can be a teacher if you let it. "Are you ready?" Marcus looked around the square one last time. At the Empress with her cold blue eyes, at Lady Catherine who was crying with relief, at the guards and nobles and common folk who had gathered to witness this strange scene. None of them had ever cared what happened to one homeless orphan. None of them would miss him when he was gone. But maybe in some small way his sacrifice would help them all. "I'm ready," he said. The dragon lowered itself until its back was accessible. "Climb up, then. Your new life begins now." Marcus approached the dragon's side and found handholds among the great scales. Climbing up was easier than he had expected. The scales provided excellent grip, and the dragon remained perfectly still to help him. Soon he was sitting on the creature's broad back, his hands gripping the base of the dragon's neck. "Hold on tightly," the dragon advised. "Flying takes some getting used to." The dragon spread its enormous wings and crouched low, preparing to leap. The crowd backed away hastily, giving it room to take off. Marcus felt his heart hammering in his chest as the dragon's powerful legs pushed against the stone of the square. Then they were airborne, rising into the darkening sky with a speed that stole Marcus's breath away. The city fell away beneath them, becoming a map of flickering lights in the gathering dusk. Higher and higher they climbed, until the air grew thin and cold around them. Marcus had never imagined anything could be so beautiful or so terrifying. The wind whipped his hair and stung his eyes, and he had to fight not to look down at the ground so far below. But gradually, as the dragon's flight settled into a steady rhythm, he began to relax. "Where are we going?" he called out, hoping his voice would carry over the wind. "To the threshold," the dragon replied, its voice somehow clear despite the rushing air. "The place where your world and mine touch. From there, we will enter the dragon realm." Marcus didn't know what that meant, but he trusted the great creature carrying him through the night sky. For the first time in years, he felt as though he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Behind them, the kingdom grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely into the darkness. Ahead lay mysteries and challenges that Marcus couldn't even imagine. But he was no longer afraid. He was no longer alone. He was a keeper of the ancient compact, and his real life was just beginning. They flew through the night for what felt like hours, though Marcus soon lost all sense of time and direction. The world below became an endless expanse of forests and mountains lit only by starlight and the pale glow of the moon. The dragon's flight was smooth and powerful, its great wings beating in a rhythm that gradually lulled Marcus into a strange, dreamlike state. When the dragon finally began to descend, Marcus saw something that made him rub his eyes in wonder. Ahead of them, hanging in the air like a curtain of liquid silver, was what appeared to be a waterfall flowing upward from the earth into the sky. But as they drew closer, Marcus realized it wasn't water at all. It was pure light, shimmering and shifting like aurora in the northern sky. "The threshold," the dragon explained, sensing his amazement. "The barrier between worlds. Hold tight now. Crossing over can be disorienting." The dragon flew directly into the wall of light, and Marcus felt a sensation like diving into warm honey. The world around them blurred and twisted, colors bleeding into each other like paint in rain. For a moment, Marcus felt as though he was being turned inside out, his thoughts scattered to the winds. Then, suddenly, they were through. The dragon realm spread out before them, like something from the most vivid dream Marcus had ever experienced. The sky was a deep purple shot through with veins of gold, and 3 moons hung overhead in a triangle formation. Below them stretched a landscape of impossible beauty. Crystal spires rose from forests of silver-leaf trees, their branches heavy with fruit that glowed like tiny lanterns. Rivers of liquid starlight wound between hills that seemed to pulse gently with their own inner light. But what took Marcus's breath away were the dragons. They were everywhere, soaring through the purple sky, basking on crystal platforms, tending gardens of flowers that sang in harmonious voices. He saw dragons of every color imaginable, deep blue like midnight oceans, brilliant red like freshly spilled blood, gleaming white like fresh snow, and gold like the heart of the sun. Some were smaller than horses, others larger than castles. All moved with a grace and intelligence that marked them as beings far beyond any earthly creature. "Welcome to Ethermore," the dragon said as they descended toward a city built into the side of a mountain. The buildings seemed to grow from the rock itself, their walls made of the same crystal as the spires Marcus had seen from above. "This has been my home for 1,000 years, and it will be yours for as long as you serve as keeper." They landed on a broad platform carved from the living rock. As soon as Marcus slid down from the dragon's back, he was surrounded by other dragons of various sizes and colors. But instead of feeling frightened, he felt oddly welcomed. Their eyes held the same intelligence and kindness he had seen in his dragon companion. "Welcome, young keeper," said a dragon the color of deep ocean water. Her voice was musical and warm. "We have waited long for your arrival." Too long, grumbled a massive red dragon whose scales seemed to hold tiny flames. The knowledge grows stale without a human mind to help interpret it. Be patient, Pyrothane, said Marcus's dragon gently. The boy has had enough overwhelming experiences for one night. What should I call you? Marcus asked suddenly, realizing he still didn't know his companion's name. I'm called Verdania, the dragon replied. I'm what you might call the keeper of keepers. It has been my duty for many centuries to train and guide those who come to serve as bridges between our peoples. An emerald-green dragon about the size of a large dog scampered forward excitedly. Is this really him? The one from the prophecy? Quiet, Zephyr, Verdania said, but her tone was fond. Yes, this is Marcus. And before you ask, no, he hasn't learned to speak the old tongue yet. Prophecy? Marcus asked, but Verdania waved a wing dismissively. Ancient words written by seers long dead. Nothing you need to worry about now. First, you need food, rest, and clean clothes. Tomorrow, your real education begins. They led him through corridors carved from living crystal, their walls covered with murals that seemed to move and shift when Marcus wasn't looking directly at them. The images showed scenes of human and dragon cooperation, dragons teaching humans to work metal and stone, humans sharing their knowledge of growing crops and building cities. It was a history Marcus had never heard, a time when the two species worked together as equals. His quarters were simple but comfortable, a round room with a bed carved from white crystal that was somehow as soft as down, a table and chair size for a human, and windows that looked out over the impossible landscape of the Dragon Realm. Clothes had been laid out for him, simple robes that were cleaner and finer than anything Marcus had ever owned. Rest well, Verdania said as she prepared to leave. Tomorrow will be challenging. But despite his exhaustion, Marcus found sleep difficult. Everything that had happened seemed like a dream. The dragon's appearance in the square, learning of his royal heritage, crossing between worlds. He kept expecting to wake up in some doorway or alley, cold and hungry and alone. When he finally did sleep, his dreams were filled with visions of the past, kings and queens he had never seen but somehow recognized, ceremonies conducted in languages he didn't understand but could somehow feel the meaning of, and always dragons and humans working together in harmony. He woke to find sunlight, if it could be called sunlight in this strange realm, streaming through his windows. The clothes fit perfectly, and he felt cleaner than he had in years despite not having bathed. When he stepped outside his room, Zephyr was waiting for him, practically bouncing with excitement. Good morning, Keeper. Verdania sent me to bring you to the Hall of Memory. That's where you'll begin learning our ways. The Hall of Memory was exactly what Marcus might have imagined if he had been trying to picture a dragon library. The chamber was enormous, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. But instead of books on shelves, knowledge was stored in crystal formations that grew from the walls and floor like frozen trees. Each crystal hummed with a different tone, and Marcus could somehow sense that they contained vast amounts of information. These are memory crystals, Verdania explained as she joined them. Each one contains centuries of knowledge, history, magic, science, philosophy, art. As Keeper, you will learn to access and interpret their contents. Ow, Marcus asked, feeling overwhelmed by the sheer scope of it. The same way you were able to touch me without being burned, Verdania said. With the blood of the old kings running in your veins, you have abilities that most humans lack. But ability without training is useless. We will start with the basics, reading and writing in the common tongue, then the old languages, then the secret scripts used for magical texts. Over the following weeks, Marcus threw himself into his studies with an intensity that surprised even him. For the first time in his life, he had purpose, direction, something to work toward beyond mere survival. The dragons were patient teachers, and Marcus proved to be a quick student. He learned that the compact between dragons and humans went back to the founding of the kingdom, when a young prince named Aldrich had befriended a dying dragon and nursed it back to health. In gratitude, The dragon had shared the secrets of magic that allowed humans to make their lands prosper and their cities flourish. The price was simple. Each generation, a keeper would be chosen to preserve and protect that knowledge. But as the centuries passed, humans had grown proud and forgetful. They began to believe that their prosperity came from their own efforts rather than from the ancient magic. Kings stopped sending keepers, and the dragons withdrew to their hidden realm to wait for humanity to remember its obligations. The knowledge we guard is dangerous in the wrong hands, Verdania explained one day as Marcus practiced reading ancient scripts. Magic that can make crops grow can also poison them. Power that can heal can also harm. That's why keepers must be chosen carefully. They must have not only the bloodline to access the magic, but the wisdom and character to use it responsibly. As Marcus's skills grew, he was given access to more complex knowledge. He learned about the weather patterns that brought rain to the kingdom's fields, the underground currents that kept the mines rich with gold and silver, the protective barriers that turned away invasions before they could even begin. All of it was maintained by dragon magic, guided by human understanding. But perhaps the most amazing discovery came when Verdania took him to the Seeing Pool, a basin of water that could show events in a human world. Through it, Marcus watched as the kingdom began to prosper again. Crops that had been failing were suddenly abundant. Mines that had been played out yielded new veins of precious metals. Border skirmishes that had been escalating mysteriously dissolved as enemy forces simply lost interest in conflict. This is what the compact provides, Verdania said as they watched farmers celebrating an unexpected harvest. Prosperity, security, abundance. But it requires constant maintenance, constant vigilance. That is the keeper's true role, to monitor the magic, to guide its application, to ensure it serves the good of all people rather than the greed of a few. 6 months into his training, Marcus was working late in the Hall of Memory when Zephyr burst in, practically vibrating with excitement. "Marcus, come quickly. You have to see this." The young dragon led him to the Seeing Pool, where several elder dragons had gathered. In the water, Marcus could see the royal square where he had first volunteered to serve. But now it was filled with people, not the frightened crowd that had gathered for the dragon's appearance, but celebrants. Children played in streets that were cleaner than Marcus had ever seen them. Merchants sold goods that looked fresh and abundant. Even the beggars looked healthier and better fed. "The magic is working," Verdania said with satisfaction. "The kingdom prospers again." But Marcus's attention was drawn to a familiar figure at the edge of the celebrating crowd. The Empress stood watching the festivities, but her expression was troubled rather than joyful. As Marcus watched, she turned and walked away from the celebration, heading toward the palace with slumped shoulders. "She knows," Marcus said quietly. "Knows what?" asked Pyrothane. "That all of this prosperity is because of the compact she tried to break. Because of a homeless boy she thought was worthless." Marcus felt a strange mixture of sadness and satisfaction. She's beginning to understand what she almost threw away. "Understanding is the beginning of wisdom," Verdania said. "Perhaps she will be a better ruler for this experience." As Marcus continued to watch the celebration in the Seeing Pool, he noticed something else. In the crowd of celebrating people, he saw faces he recognized, other street children who had once been as hungry and desperate as he had been. But now they looked fed, healthy, hopeful. Some were even wearing new clothes and had found work with merchants or craftsmen. "The prosperity flows down to everyone," Marcus murmured in wonder. "Even those at the bottom." "That is the true power of the compact," Verdania said. "It doesn't just enrich the wealthy, it lifts up all people. That's why the old kings agreed to it in the first place. They understood that a kingdom is only as strong as its weakest citizen." As the months turned to years, Marcus grew from a frightened, ragged boy into a confident young man. His studies expanded beyond reading and writing to include the practical applications of dragon magic. He learned to sense the flow of underground currents, to read the signs in cloud formations, to understand the subtle energies that kept the kingdom's borders secure. But, perhaps more importantly, he learned about himself. The royal blood that ran in his veins was more than just a biological inheritance. It carried with it a deep understanding of leadership, justice, and responsibility. He began to see patterns in the kingdom's needs, to anticipate problems before they became crises. "You're becoming something new," Verdania told him one day as they stood on a crystal balcony, watching the 3 moons rise over the Dragon Realm. "Not just a keeper, but a true bridge between our peoples." The prophecies spoke of this, a keeper who would unite the bloodlines of ancient kings with the wisdom of dragons. "What prophecies?" Marcus asked. "You've mentioned them before, but you never told me what they actually said." Verdania was quiet for a long moment. That a keeper would come who carried the strongest royal blood scene in 1,000 years. That he would be found not in palaces, but in poverty, tested by suffering, but not broken by it. That through him, the compact would evolve into something greater than it had ever been before. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "What does that mean? Something greater?" "I believe," Verdania said carefully, "that your role as keeper is only the beginning. Eventually, you will need to return to the human world. But when you do, you won't return as the homeless orphan who left. You'll return as something unprecedented, a human who truly understands dragon magic, a keeper who can bridge not just our 2 peoples, but our 2 forms of wisdom." As Marcus looked out over the crystal spires and silver forests of the Dragon Realm, he felt the truth of those words settling into his bones. His time here was training for something larger, something that would reshape both worlds. But for now, he was content to learn, to grow, and to tend the ancient magic that kept the kingdom prosperous and safe. He had found his purpose at last, not as a forgotten street orphan, but as a keeper of the ancient compact, guardian of the bridge between worlds. In the Seeing Pool, the kingdom continued to flourish under the protection of the renewed compact. And in the Dragon Realm, a young man who had once been invisible to the world prepared for a destiny he was only beginning to understand. The homeless orphan was gone forever. In his place stood Marcus the Keeper, heir to the wisdom of dragons and the blood of ancient kings, guardian of the bond that would shape the future of both worlds.